This week in gaming, we got a fresh look at Wardogs, and it looks incredible. Bungie announced a massive turning point for Destiny 2, Arc Raiders matchmaking details were revealed, and much more. This week we got a fresh look at the upcoming large-scale tactical FPS, Wardogs. In a new video, the devs show off the game's advanced ballistic system, sound design, and how the match economy system works. The devs have created a per-bullet physics system that simulates wind, gravity, bullet weight, and more accurately replicates how real-world guns and ammo work. They also showcase some impressive sound design elements that give players directional cues based on the whiz of bullets passing by. These sounds are affected by the weapons and type of ammo being fired, so subsonic rounds will sound different for faster moving rounds. Caliber also has a massive impact on the sound of gunshots, with 9mm rounds barely making a dent in the game's soundscape, with 50 cal sniper rounds breaking the sound barrier with a terrifying crack. One of the highlights of the video for me was a deep dive into how the match economy works. Wardogs takes after games like Arma and Squad, where your team supplies are a resource that dictates what kinds of gear you'll have access to. Unlike those games though, your supplies are a cash reserve you earn by killing enemies, transporting friendlies, and playing the objective. What's interesting though is that typical support actions like transporting teammates in a chopper or a jeep also reward you with money when those teammates then get kills. And I love the idea of the logistics side of gameplay getting properly rewarded here. There's not a lot of games that do this right. There's a lot of games that try, but there's too many ways to exploit the system. If Wardogs can get it right, that would be amazing. And finally, the devs announced that they're slowly rolling out playtesting and that you can sign up on their website. The game is scheduled to launch in early access sometime this year. It has not been a kind couple of years for Bungie. The studio officially pulled the plug on Destiny 2. The beleaguered sci-fi shooter is getting a final update, Moment of Triumph, in June, and then support will be reduced to maintaining the game in a playable state. This update will include content planned for future updates, as well as restoring sections of older content that had been removed. Recent reporting revealed that Bungie are burning a nearly $1 billion hole in Sony's bottom line. The studio doesn't currently have any games ready to enter production, and no future projects have been greenlit yet. Sony are potentially planning a significant number of layoffs at the studio. It seems like the future success or survival of the studio could be hinging on Marathon. Bungie recently announced plans to address player feedback and add new content to their extraction shooter, but it's tough to say if that game has any hope of recovering from its steady decline in player counts. On Steam, it's averaging 12,000 concurrent players, which is shockingly more than Destiny 2, a game that once boasted over 300,000 concurrent players 5 years after launching. Amidst all this news, Sony also announced a price hike for all tiers of PlayStation Plus. All tiers went up in price on the 20th by roughly $2. The initial announcement made it sound like only the base tier of the subscription service was getting an increase, but when the change went live, it had clearly applied to all tiers. Subnautica 2 is shaping up to be the fastest selling game on Steam for 2026. With over 4 million copies sold in its first week and over 6 million players total, the early access underwater survival game has been a smash hit. It's currently selling at a faster pace than Crimson Desert and Slay the Spire 2, which both sold at record-breaking paces. And while Subnautica 2 sales have been phenomenal, the devs are promising fixes based on player feedback to address some major areas of improvement. They're working on making avoiding hostile wildlife more enjoyable. The tools for avoiding or distracting hostile creatures are pretty limited right now, and the devs think fleshing these tools out mechanics will work better than letting players just kill fish. Hot off the heels of announcing a huge change to the frequency of major updates, Arc Raiders developers peeled back the curtain on their matchmaking system and released a pretty major tweak to the durability changes they made with the Riven Tides update. Weapon durability for a selection of guns has been buffed by 18 to 54% depending on the gun. The Riven Tides update dramatically increased the wear rates for nearly all weapons, so this seems like a nice correction. Now, as for the matchmaking system, in a nutshell, Embark clarified how the game's PvP versus PvE matchmaking works. Players are matched together with similarly behaving players. So if you do a lot of PvP and are very aggressive, you will likely end up in lobbies with more of a PvP slant to player population. Likewise, if you're more of a PvE enjoyer, you'll be matchmake with players that are generally avoiding initiating PvP fights. A major change the devs announced alongside this info is that they've tweaked what the matchmaking system considers initiating a PvP fight. Previously, any PvP fight you found yourself in would count as an act of aggression, even if you were just defending yourself. Now, defending yourself will be considered differently. Also, the amount of time you spend in a match and your activity will be weighted more accurately, so players can't kind of game the system by quickly joining a match and surrendering to try and get their aggression rating down. Embark have also made the controversial decision to implement Denuvo's anti-cheat tools in Arc Raiders. These are different from Denuvo's DRM, which has a reputation of causing performance issues and outages when the company's servers are unavailable. These anti-cheat tools were used for Embark's competitive FPS title The Finals, and they seemed effective, so hopefully they don't cause any disruptions for Arc Raiders. Speaking of anti-cheat tools, Riot's in-house anti-cheat software Vanguard for their competitive FPS Valorant is apparently bricking the operating system on PCs of cheaters. It does this by blocking the firmware used by storage devices at an OS level, effectively disabling your storage until you reinstall Windows on your PC. In response to outrage from cheaters caught by Vanguard, Riot said, "Congrats to the owners of a brand new $6,000 paperweight." Now, on one hand, it's great that Riot is taking cheating so seriously, but on the other hand, requiring every Valorant player to install a piece of software that has the capacity to literally brick your entire Windows system is insane. You're basically giving Riot control of your PC just to play the game and hoping that they don't, mistakenly think that you're a cheater. The other concerning part of this is that if anyone manages to crack into the Vanguard server system, could potentially shut down thousands of PCs with this software installed. It's just a massive liability, and I'm glad I'm not a Vanguard player. Upcoming third-person sci-fi shooter The Expanse Osiris Reborn is getting some massive changes ahead of launch. The devs announced this week that they're recasting the voice actor for the game's male protagonist. They said the current performance was less expressive than they wanted. Players who tried the game's recent beta test and are familiar with the Expanse books and show were disappointed that the game didn't feature the particular accents the franchise is known for, so that might also be a factor in this decision. The devs are also working to improve character animation, which was noticeably stiff in the beta. All that said, the game isn't scheduled to launch until the middle of next year, so they still have plenty of time to iron out all the rough spots. The developers of the co-op space democracy shooter Helldivers 2 called in the big guns to get the game running better. Arrowhead Games announced this week that they're going to be working with the PC port specialist studio Nixies to implement a variety of new features and performance improvements. The game's next update will implement FSR, DLSS, and XeSS upscaling, along with AMD anti-lag and NVIDIA Reflex. Console players will also get the various upscaling methods available to their hardware. What makes this such a big update is that when Helldivers 2 launched, its engine didn't even support upscalers, so this update represents a pretty monumental overhaul to the game's core technologies. It also means the player count could see huge leaps in performance. Kingdom Come Deliverance 2's developers have confirmed that they're currently developing a Lord of the Rings game set in an open-world Middle-earth. The announcement was very light on details, but also confirmed a new Kingdom Come game is in the works as well. Since Halo with Portals and Heroes didn't work out, Splitgate 2's developers have pivoted to cloning Titanfall. They announced a new game called Empulse this week, along with a new website where players can sign up to potentially get access to the game and screenshots that make it look like Titanfall, I guess. The game will be a 6v6 PvP FPS with wall running, grapples, a hollow jump, pilot mech, and paint. If you're unaware, this studio released Splitgate 2 last year to disastrous results. It was a direct sequel to their original arena shooter with Portals, but took the experience in a new direction, adding class-based heroes, battle royale modes, and other elements that players felt were very out of place. Its player base dropped 90% basically overnight. The studio was hit with layoffs. They relaunched the game with major changes, but it never recovered. Up next, check out my recent dive into Subnautica 2, a game that I was initially afraid of because I just don't like giant, vast expanses in the ocean, ended up becoming one of my new favorite experiences. I think you'll enjoy the video. As always, thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time. This is Level Cap, signing off.